Today, we face a serious crisis in Ukraine. And it's worth reminding ourselves that it all started with Russia's refusal, which continues to this day, to allow the Ukrainian people to choose their own destiny, including a free trade agreement with the European Union. Remarkable. The EU and the United States are standing up for the principle of territorial integrity, the rejection of changes of borders through the use of force, and respect for international law. Russia's actions represent a fundamental challenge to our shared values and the rules-based international order. They require a steadfast response and a willingness to bear the costs. We have been busy following up on the recommendations of the USEU Energy Ministerial in Brussels last spring regarding measures to enhance energy security in Ukraine. Some medium to long-term measures which could avoid Russian territory were also discussed. There are many ways in which the US and the EU can collaborate on energy security. These may include LNG exports from the United States, the mobilization of private capital to build the necessary infrastructure in Europe, collaboration on enhancing the transparency of Ukraine's energy sector, assisting Ukraine to develop national hydrocarbon resources, and sharing experiences in the development of alternative energies. In Iran, High Representative Ashton has shown remarkable leadership in the P5+1 talks, as we call them, the E3+3 in EU parlance. The United States remains committed to working with our P5+1 partners towards a long-term comprehensive solution that provides confidence that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. An initial step was taken with an interim joint plan of action which provided limited relief from certain sanctions in exchange for Iranian steps that halted its nuclear program and rolled it back in key respects. The relief agreed was limited outside of the specific areas provided for in the joint plan of action. U.S. sanctions remain in place and we continue to enforce them, an essential part of our dual-track policy to continue to maintain pressure on Iran in order to achieve a successful outcome in the negotiations over its nuclear program. The issue of foreign terrorist fighters who travel to and from Syria has been a top issue of concern for the United States and for the EU. The United States is particularly focused on building a common EU passenger name record system and in increasing the effectiveness of sharing information collected through a European PNR, passenger name record system, with U.S. border security officials in order to prevent acts of terrorism by foreign terrorist fighters. The Safe Harbor framework was developed, as many of you may know, to provide a mechanism allowing U.S.-based companies to receive EU citizens' data in a manner consistent with the EU Data Protection Directive. The framework has proven to be of critical importance to ensuring transatlantic data flows, which is the lifeblood of transatlantic commerce. Over 3,000 companies certify their data privacy policies under this framework. Last November, the Commission outlined 13 recommendations for strengthening Safe Harbor. We have since embarked on discussions with the Commission on potential updates to that framework, making good progress in 11 commercially focused recommendations, and we're now focused on 2 of the recommendations, 12 and 13, related to the national security exemption, of which perhaps some of you have read. While these are clearly the most challenging, we are planning on submitting a detailed description of how U.S. laws and policies restrict the application of such an exemption in order to provide comfort that it is narrowly construed. Talks on the umbrella agreement, which is for law enforcement, are well advanced and we're working hard to resolve the remaining issues. We share the EU's commitment to privacy and are responding to EU concerns and questions about how we protect personal data. In addition to changing the principles that govern what we do and what we don't do abroad in surveillance, President Obama called for the extension of additional protections to the personal data of non-US citizens, a key request of some of our European partners. He is committed to seeking passage by the US Congress of legislation giving EU citizens the same rights to judicial redress that the U.S. Privacy Act gives to American citizens. That is a significant step forward. TTIP is simply the best debt-free stimulus available. Not the only one. We think of the digital agenda. We can think of reforming labor markets. We can think of many other things. But it is one, surely, of the most important ways that Europe can stimulate growth and jobs. And we certainly know that Europe needs to stimulate growth and jobs. It would also be of geostrategic importance because it would set a standard for future regional and global deals that reflect the value we place on rules-based trade, high standards, and regulatory transparency and accountability. It would enhance the US-EU partnership in the realm of trade negotiations, helping to make progress in the stalled WTO talks, and ensuring that world trade rules will continue to be compatible with free market democratic systems. Unfortunately, the debate in Europe is increasingly being marred by a rising tide in certain member states of misinformation and what I would even call scaremongering by certain social media, press, and NGOs. While everyone is certainly entitled to his own interpretation of what we're trying to achieve, everyone should not be entitled to his own facts. And I said that yesterday in my appearance before the International Trade Committee of the European Parliament, which is going to play a critical role, obviously, in determining whether this agreement gets over the line. In that testimony, I set forth several propositions. First, leaders should have the courage to lead and to inform, not simply cater to prevailing opinions when these are misinformed. Second, the myriad of technical issues in the negotiation should be considered in the wider perspective of the economic gains to be gained and the geostrategic context in which we are negotiating. Third, both sides should seek to advance pragmatic solutions to their disagreements and avoid rhetoric that complicates the negotiations. I can give you a few examples of that on both sides. Fourth, critics who remain deeply skeptical of what we're trying to achieve should at least wait until they see advanced text before making up their minds. I believe that the US-EU relationship will continue to broaden and to deepen. That's not an article of faith, but our shared values are real. In the more dangerous, less predictable world in which we live, our mutual interests demand a robust global partnership. All I can say is I'll try to do my part in helping its continued development. Thanks very much.